It's funny how life has a way of moving forward, regardless of whether we're ready or not. For most of my life, I'd been in the background, quietly playing the role of mother, wife, friend, giving, sacrificing, and trying to stay out of the way. I was the one who made sure everyone else was taken care of, even if that meant ignoring my own needs, my own dreams. That was what mothers did, right? We loved, we cared, we gave, and we hoped that the love we poured into others would come back to us someday. But life has a way of surprising you, especially when you least expect it. For me, that surprise came in the form of a café, a small, humble space that I turned into a tribute to the past. I had always been drawn to memories, to the things that made me feel connected to a time when life was simpler, slower. A time when people were more present, when everything wasn't rushed, when a meal together could last for hours, and when we all sat around the table, laughing, telling stories. After years of giving and living in the shadows, I wanted to create something for myself, something that reflected the pieces of my soul I had kept hidden. I wanted to open a cafe, but not just any cafe. It would be one filled with nostalgia, a place where people could feel like they had stepped back in time. A place where memories weren't just tucked away in photo albums, but brought to life in every corner. I began to gather everything that reminded me of my past. The old typewriter that used to sit on my mother's desk, the vintage records I used to listen to while baking in the kitchen, the Polaroid photos that captured moments from my youth. It was more than just decor. It was a way to feel connected to a time when I wasn't just someone's mother or wife. I was me. I spent hours crafting the perfect menu, filled with dishes that had stories of their own. My grandmother's chicken pot pie recipe, my mother's famous apple pie, and of course, the coffee that always brought us together. I wanted this cafe to be a haven for people who, like me, sometimes felt lost in the noise of the present. A place to pause, to breathe, and to remember. But it wasn't just the cafe that I was creating. It was a chance to rediscover myself, the woman I had once been before life got in the way. Before I became so consumed with everyone else's needs that I forgot my own. This cafe was a way to remind myself that I still had dreams. I still had a voice. And so, with a heart full of hope, I opened the doors to my nostalgia cafe. I had no idea what would come next, but I knew one thing for sure. This was my time. And maybe, just maybe, this was where my story was finally going to be heard. Once I had the idea in my mind, I couldn't let it go. It was like a spark had been lit inside me, and I knew I had to bring it to life. The Nostalgia Cafe wasn't just going to be another coffee shop. It was going to be something special. A place that could make people feel the warmth of old memories, the comfort of a simpler time, and a connection that seemed to be fading from our fast-paced world. I had spent so many years taking care of everyone else, making sure they had everything they needed, the perfect home, the perfect meals, the perfect holidays. But no one ever asked me what I needed, what I wanted. It was always about the family, the children, the husband, the job, the house, the responsibilities. I didn't mind. I did it because I loved them. But now, for the first time, I was doing something just for me. And that felt liberating. The cafe's concept came together slowly, piece by piece. I wanted every inch of it to feel like a trip down memory lane, a place that could evoke that feeling of being at home, no matter how far from home you were. Every table had to tell a story. Every corner had to hold a piece of my past. I filled it with vintage decor, the kind of things that make you smile when you look at them because they remind you of something, a childhood toy, a family gathering, a song you used to dance to in the kitchen with a loved one. I hunted for old furniture, mismatched chairs, and tables that looked like they had been pulled from someone's attic or garage sale. I found a beautiful old record player, and I filled the space with music from the 50s and 60s, the music that made me feel like I could dance again, even if it was just in my mind. The walls were lined with photos, old family photos, some of them a bit faded, others in black and white, capturing moments frozen in time. I wanted people to walk in and feel like they were stepping into someone's home. My home, a place that had seen laughter, tears, good meals, bad days, and everything in between. But it wasn't just about the atmosphere. It was about the food, too. I wanted the menu to reflect the kind of meals that made you feel loved. The kind of meals that took time to prepare, that were meant to be shared around a table with those who mattered most. I kept my grandmother's chicken pot pie recipe, the one she made every Sunday, and the one that always made me feel like everything was going to be okay. I kept my mother's apple pie recipe, the one she made for every holiday, the one that filled our house with the sweet smell of cinnamon and sugar. And, of course, there was the coffee. The same coffee my mother used to brew in the morning, the one that brought the whole family together. I didn't want to just serve food. I wanted to serve memories. The kind of food that made you feel like you were back at the family table, surrounded by people who loved you. And for a brief moment, I wanted to give people the feeling that nothing had changed, that the world outside hadn't gotten so complicated, so fast-paced, so distant. As I started putting everything together, I could feel the excitement building inside me. This cafe was becoming more than just a dream. It was becoming a reality. It wasn't going to be just another place to get a cup of coffee. It was going to be a place where people could feel something again, where they could connect, even if just for a little while, to a time when life felt simpler, slower, and more meaningful. I was doing it. I was creating something that was all mine. Something that would be remembered. Something that would finally give me a voice. I'll admit, I was a bit skeptical at first. Social media had always seemed like something for younger people. My children used it to share photos of their kids, and occasionally I'd scroll through to see what was going on in the world, but I never really got into it. Then one day, a friend came into the cafe and mentioned TikTok and how some people were using it to share their businesses and passions. She told me, "You should try it, Margaret. You never know what could happen." I was hesitant. TikTok was this whole new world, full of dancing, trends, and music that I couldn't even keep up with. But there was something about the idea of sharing my story that resonated with me. I realized that I had spent so many years keeping my life private, always behind the scenes, always doing for others. But maybe, just maybe, it was time to share my own journey. Maybe TikTok could be the platform that allowed me to do that. So, I took a deep breath and made my first video. I didn't overthink it. I just turned on the camera, stood in front of the cafe, and shared what I was doing. I spoke from the heart, showing the little details of the cafe, the old records on the shelf, the vintage photographs on the walls, the dishes that took me back to my childhood. I told them about my dreams for the cafe and why it meant so much to me. And, honestly, I added a bit of humor to keep it light. A little joke here, a little wink there. After all, if I was going to do this, I wasn't going to take myself too seriously. I posted it, not really expecting anything. Maybe a few views from friends and family, maybe a comment or two. But when I checked the next morning, I saw that the video had hundreds of views, then thousands, and soon it had gone viral. My notifications were going off like crazy. Comments, likes, shares. People were resonating with my story. They were connecting to the nostalgia of it all, to the idea of a place where they could take a step back and just breathe for a moment. They weren't just looking for coffee. They were looking for meaning. It was surreal. It felt like I was suddenly a part of something much bigger than myself. I'd always been the quiet observer, the one behind the scenes. But now, people were hearing my voice. They were seeing my cafe, my vision, and they liked it. They really liked it. The comments poured in. "I need to visit this place. This is exactly what the world needs right now. You're so inspiring." At first, I wasn't sure how to handle the attention. It felt both thrilling and overwhelming. But then, something clicked. This wasn't just about a viral video. It wasn't just about getting views or gaining popularity. It was about telling my story. It was about showing that, even at my age, I still had something to say, something to share. People were listening and they cared. It was a feeling I had never experienced before, and it felt like a door had opened, a door that had been closed for far too long. Every new video I made, every new post I shared, felt like a step further into a world I had never really belonged to. But now, with each new view, each new comment, I was starting to realize that maybe, just maybe, I did belong. Maybe the world wasn't done with me yet, and neither was I. The first time I saw the numbers, The views, the comments, the likes, I thought there had to be some mistake. It couldn't be real. But it was. My first video had gone viral. I didn't know exactly what that meant at the time, but the flood of notifications that kept popping up on my phone told me something big was happening. It wasn't just the numbers that shocked me, though. It was the connection. The messages from people who had watched my video and felt a pull to share their own stories. They weren't just commenting on my cafe or my concept. They were opening up about their own struggles, their own nostalgia, and their own desires to reconnect with a simpler time. They were talking about the things that had been lost in their lives, things they hadn't realized they were missing until they saw my video. One message stood out. I've been feeling invisible for years. Your cafe sounds like the kind of place I need. Thank you for showing me that there's still hope for people like me. That one hit me hard. It made me realize that this wasn't just about a viral video. This wasn't just about TikTok fame or gaining followers. It was about something deeper. My cafe had struck a chord with people because it wasn't just about serving coffee and food. It was about offering something people were craving, a sense of belonging, a connection to something they had lost along the way. I never expected to be seen. I never expected to matter so much to people I didn't even know. But the more I read those messages, the more I realized how much of myself I had been hiding and how much I had been yearning for someone to notice, to see me for more than just the roles I had played in my family. The quiet mother, the quiet wife. This cafe wasn't just a business, it was a lifeline. It wasn't just about serving a cup of coffee or making a beautiful apple pie. It was about creating a space where people could finally pause, reflect, and maybe for the first time in a long while, feel seen. The comments were pouring in, telling me how much they loved the idea of a place filled with memories, a place that didn't just offer food, but comfort and connection. And then came the first invitation to collaborate. Someone from a local news station reached out, asking if they could feature my cafe on their segment about local businesses. I was stunned. A simple cafe, my cafe, was going to be on TV? And it wasn't just that. More and more people were sharing my videos, tagging their friends, telling their followers to check out my cafe. Suddenly, I was at the center of something I never imagined possible. I felt a rush, but it wasn't just the attention. It was the power of sharing my story, of letting the world into this little corner of my life that I had built. For the first time, I wasn't just the invisible woman in the background. I wasn't just the one who quietly served others. I was the one leading the charge, creating something from the ground up, and people were responding to it in ways I never could have anticipated. The cafe became more than just a place to sit and sip coffee. It became a meeting point for others who shared similar feelings of being overlooked or forgotten. It became a reminder to people that they mattered, that their stories were worth hearing. And every time someone walked in, I saw it in their eyes, that spark of recognition, of belonging, of coming home. The videos kept coming. With each new post, I shared a little more of myself, and in return, people gave a little more of themselves. And with every connection, every interaction, I realized something important. This wasn't just about running a cafe. This was about building a community where people, regardless of their age, their background, or their story, could find a place to feel seen, valued, and understood. In that moment, I knew the truth. The viral success of my TikTok wasn't just about me getting attention. It was about people needing this place to reflect on their own memories, to feel the comfort of nostalgia, and to know that they were not alone. As the days passed and the attention from my viral TikTok continued to grow, something unexpected began to shift inside me. The cafe was no longer just a business. It had become a place where I could rediscover myself, and TikTok had given me a platform to finally have a voice. For years, I had felt invisible. I had spent my life caring for my family, doing everything I could to support my children, my husband, and the house. I gave so much of myself that I forgot who I was outside of those roles. The woman I had once been, the woman with dreams, with passions, with a voice of her own, had been buried under layers of responsibility and quiet sacrifices. I had become so used to being overlooked, so accustomed to fading into the background, that I had almost forgotten how to stand tall and speak up for myself. But with each new comment, with each new follower, something inside me started to change. I began to see that my story mattered. People weren't just responding to the nostalgia of my cafe. They were responding to me. The real me. The woman who had spent so many years giving everything and asking for nothing in return. They were connecting with my vulnerability, my openness, and my honesty. One afternoon, as I sat at the counter of the cafe, watching a couple of young women laughing over coffee, it hit me. I had spent so much of my life giving to others that I had never truly asked for anything for myself. I had always been the quiet one, the one who didn't rock the boat, the one who quietly supported everyone else's dreams. But now here I was with a platform, a community, and a space that was mine. It was time for me to reclaim my voice. I decided to post another video, one that was less about the cafe and more about my own journey. I talked about my past, the years spent raising my children, the sacrifices I made, the quiet moments when I wished someone had seen me. I talked about the loneliness I had felt, even when surrounded by people. I opened up about how, after my husband passed and my daughter distanced herself, I had started to wonder if my worth was tied only to what I could do for others. But now, with the cafe, with TikTok, I was starting to remember who I was. I was more than just a mother. I was more than just a wife. I was Margaret, and I deserved to be seen. The response was overwhelming. People shared their own stories of feeling invisible, of sacrificing for others, of losing themselves in the process. They thanked me for speaking up, for showing them that it was okay to find your voice, no matter how old you were. It was the first time in my life that I truly felt like I was part of something bigger, a community of people who understood me, who had walked a similar path. One message in particular stood out. It was from a woman who said, "I'm in my 60s and I feel like I've spent my whole life taking care of others. I've lost myself in the process. Your video made me realize that it's not too late for me. I can still find my voice." Reading that, I realized something powerful. It was never too late. It didn't matter how many years had passed, how many sacrifices I had made. My story was still unfolding. And for the first time, I was in control of how it would go. I started to look at my cafe differently too. It wasn't just a place where people came for coffee. It was a sanctuary for people like me, people who had been overlooked, who had lost their way, but who were finally ready to take up space in the world. Every person who walked through the door was part of this shared journey. And I realized that in helping others rediscover their own memories and joy, I was rediscovering mine too. The cafe became a symbol of that reclamation, a place where I could be who I was without apology, a place where I could be seen not just as a mother or a grandmother, but as Margaret, a woman who had a life worth celebrating, a story worth telling, and a future worth embracing. It wasn't long before the attention from my TikTok videos began to ripple outward, and suddenly, my family started to take notice. I had always kept my dreams quiet, tucked away in the back of my mind. But now, as the cafe gained more recognition, it seemed like everyone had something to say about it, especially my daughter, Amanda. At first, I didn't think much of it. After all, this wasn't the kind of thing I expected anyone in my family to understand right away. The cafe wasn't just a business. It was a personal endeavor, a way for me to find my voice, my purpose, after years of giving everything I had to others. But when Amanda called one evening, her voice laced with that all too familiar tone of judgment, I started to feel the weight of the tension building up. "You know, Mom," she started, "I saw your TikTok. It's great that you're doing something for yourself, but, well, I don't know. It seems a little, I don't know, out of place. You're living in nostalgia, Mom. You're holding on to the past. Why can't you just move forward?" Her words stung. It wasn't just the criticism of the cafe itself, but the underlying message. The message that I was somehow stuck, that my efforts to reclaim my life were invalid. I had worked so hard, sacrificed so much, and now, for the first time, I was doing something that felt truly mine, and she couldn't understand it. But her words didn't just stop there. As the weeks passed, I began to notice something else. Amanda had become distant, even more so than usual. She wasn't just questioning my cafe or my TikTok videos, she was questioning me. She didn't come by the cafe much, and when she did, she barely stayed. She made excuses. "I'm busy, Mom," she would say, barely looking up from her phone, a forced smile barely masking the distance between us. And then came the comments from Chad, Amanda's husband. I'd always sensed a certain resentment in him, a quiet irritation that I had tried to ignore for years. But now, as I started to gain some success and recognition, that resentment became more apparent. One evening, when I had invited Amanda and Chad over for a small family dinner, Chad's true feelings came to light. We were sitting around the table, eating the meal I had spent hours preparing, and out of nowhere he said it. "I don't know why you're putting all this effort into this cafe, Margaret. No one cares about that kind of thing anymore. Maybe it's time to let it go. You're just clinging to the past." The words felt like a slap in the face. I looked at Amanda, hoping for some sign of support, but she just stared at her phone, avoiding my gaze. It was in that moment that I realized how far apart we had drifted. They didn't understand me. They didn't see what I had been trying to do. To them, I was just an inconvenience, a woman in her 60s trying to hold on to something that no one cared about. It broke me, but it also lit a fire inside me. I wasn't going to let them dismiss my dreams so easily. I wasn't going to let them dictate who I was or what I could do. This cafe was mine, and if they couldn't understand that, then that was their problem, not mine. I took a deep breath, pushed my chair back from the table, and calmly said, "Maybe you're right, Chad. Maybe I am clinging to the past. But at least the past is where I find my strength. And if you can't respect that, then maybe it's time for me to stop apologizing for it." Amanda's eyes finally met mine, but she said nothing. She didn't defend me. She didn't speak up. And that, in a way, hurt even more than the words Chad had said. Because in that moment, I realized that I had been clinging to the hope that she would see me. That she would understand why I was doing this, not just for the cafe, but for myself. But now I wasn't so sure. I knew the path I was on wasn't going to be easy. I knew that standing up for myself, for my own dreams, meant that there would be people who wouldn't get it. There would be people who would try to tear me down, to make me feel small, to tell me I wasn't enough. But I also knew that I couldn't go back. I couldn't go back to being invisible, to being the woman who faded into the background, the one who lived only for others. I had to keep going. For me, for the woman I had rediscovered in myself. And so, with a heavy heart but a determined spirit, I continued with the cafe. I posted more videos. I shared more of my story. And every time I did, I felt the walls around me start to crack. Because in the end, I realized that it wasn't about the approval of my family. It was about my own approval. I had to believe in myself, even if no one else did. As I continued to build the cafe, I began to realize something profound. It wasn't just the decor, the food, or the music that made the cafe special. It was the nostalgia that breathed life into it, the memories it stirred up for people, the way it made them feel like they had been transported to another time, another place. I wasn't just serving coffee, I was serving memories. The more I interacted with my customers, the more I saw how deeply people craved that connection to the past. It wasn't just about a time period or an era. It was about the feelings those times evoked. People walked into the cafe, looked around, and their eyes would light up. They'd touch an old vinyl record on the shelf or point to a picture on the wall of a vintage car, and they'd say, "I remember that. My dad had one just like it," or "That's the same album we used to play at family parties when I was a kid." It was in those moments that I realized something important. Nostalgia wasn't just about looking back. It was about remembering who we were before the world asked us to be someone else. It was about reconnecting with the parts of ourselves that we had left behind, the dreams we had forgotten, the joy we once felt in the simple things, the warmth of family and home that had slipped through our fingers as life got busier and more complicated. I started to share more of my own story with my customers, not just in passing, but in the way I served them, in the way I spoke about the cafe. The food I made was more than just a meal. It was a piece of my past, a piece of my family's history. The chicken pot pie my grandmother had taught me to make, the apple pie my mother baked for every Thanksgiving, the homemade jams that reminded me of summer mornings spent picking fruit from the garden. Each dish was a memory, and each memory was a story waiting to be told. One afternoon, as I stood behind the counter, a woman came in with her young daughter. The daughter, no more than 10 years old, was holding a small stuffed bear that looked worn and loved. She sat at the table with her mother, and as I delivered their order, the woman looked up at me, a soft smile on her face. "I remember my grandmother making pie just like this," she said, her voice tinged with emotion. "It's like you've taken me back to a time when I felt safe, when I felt loved." Her words hit me harder than I expected. I hadn't realized how powerful nostalgia could be, how it could make people feel a sense of belonging and warmth in a world that often feels too fast, too disconnected. I had created more than a cafe. I had created a place where people could pause and remember that there was still something beautiful in the world, something worth cherishing. Later that day, I received a message from a woman who had visited the cafe the week before. She told me that she had sat in the corner for hours, drinking coffee and reading old letters she'd brought with her. "I didn't expect to cry," she wrote, "but your cafe made me remember my mother's handwriting, the way she used to write me notes. I didn't realize how much I missed that until I walked in here." It was in those moments that I realized how much power nostalgia had, not just in evoking memories, but in healing old wounds. It wasn't just about the past. It was about how the past could shape the present. People were walking into my cafe looking for something, and they were finding it. A sense of connection, a moment of peace, a brief escape from the chaos of their daily lives. But it wasn't just my customers who were finding comfort in nostalgia. It was me, too. In a way, the cafe had become a mirror, a reflection of the woman I used to be, the woman I had almost forgotten. It reminded me of the simpler times, the times when I felt like I was part of something bigger than just the day-to-day grind. It reminded me that I had a past worth cherishing, a past that had shaped the woman I had become. And just like that, the cafe wasn't just a way to relive memories. It was a way to heal. It was a way to reconnect with parts of myself that I had buried, to reclaim the pieces of me that had been lost in the shuffle of life. I wasn't just living in nostalgia. I was living through it, using it as a way to heal, to grow, and to move forward. In that cafe, surrounded by the memories of my past, I was beginning to understand something fundamental, that I could honor my history, embrace it, and still move toward the future. Nostalgia wasn't a chain holding me back. It was a bridge that allowed me to cross over into a new chapter of my life. The cafe had transformed from a simple dream into something so much more, a sanctuary not just for others, but for me. And yet, despite everything I had built, I couldn't ignore the undercurrent of tension in my own life. The tension that had been there from the start, the distance between me and my daughter, Amanda, the subtle resentment from Chad, and the way they looked at my cafe as if it was some kind of hobby rather than something that had given me new life. I couldn't keep pretending that I didn't feel the sting of their judgment, their silence. It had been hard in the beginning to fully embrace the fact that my family, the ones I had done everything for, couldn't understand the significance of what I was doing. They didn't see the cafe as an act of self-love, a way for me to finally step into my own power after years of feeling invisible. They saw it as an inconvenience, a distraction, even a joke. But the more time passed, the more I realized that this wasn't their journey. It was mine, and it was time for me to reclaim the power I had always given away. For years, I had put myself last. I had put everyone else first, my children, my husband, my family. I had swallowed my dreams, my ambitions, my desires, all in the name of love and duty. But somewhere along the way, I lost myself in the process. I forgot that I had a voice that mattered, that I had dreams worth chasing. It was easy to do that when you're always in the background, always the one who's taking care of things. But now, with the cafe and the TikTok videos, I was learning that I wasn't just someone's mother or wife. I was Margaret, and Margaret had a life of her own, a life that was worth fighting for. One day, as I sat in the cafe watching people interact, I realized something. I wasn't just healing through nostalgia. I was also reclaiming my place in the world. The stories I shared, the videos I made, the memories I stirred up in my customers, they weren't just for them. They were for me. Every time I shared a memory of my childhood, Every time I talked about my grandmother's pie or my father's old typewriter, I was telling the world who I was, what I had lived through, and why it mattered. It wasn't just the cafe that had changed me. It was the act of putting myself first, of finally acknowledging my own worth. For the first time, I wasn't apologizing for being myself. I wasn't shrinking. I was standing tall and proud of what I had created. And that's when I realized that I didn't need anyone's approval. Not from Amanda. Not from Chad. I didn't need anyone to tell me that my cafe was worth it, that my TikTok videos were okay. I had spent too long seeking validation from people who would never truly see me. It wasn't their approval I needed. It was my own. The cafe became my sanctuary, not just a business, but a space where I could be unapologetically myself. It was a place where I could take pride in my past and in the woman I had become. And the more I embraced this power, the power of my story, my history, my voice, the more I began to see how much I had underestimated myself. I wasn't just a woman who had raised children and kept a house together. I was a force in my own right. I had a lifetime of wisdom, experience, and strength that I had never fully acknowledged. The cafe had given me the courage to see that. Amanda and Chad's criticism still stung, but it no longer had the power to shake me. Their lack of understanding was no longer my burden to carry. I was done living for their approval, done living in the shadows of their expectations. I was living for myself now, and that was enough. I was beginning to see that sometimes the hardest part of reclaiming power is simply allowing yourself to take up space. For so long, I had been told, either directly or through silence, that I wasn't worthy of attention, that my dreams didn't matter. But now I was learning to stand in the spotlight, not just for the world, but for myself. And I wasn't going to shrink anymore. It's funny how quickly things can change when you stop living for others and start living for yourself. What began as a small, nostalgic cafe to bring back memories of a simpler time had evolved into so much more. It had become my sanctuary, my safe haven. And slowly but surely it had become a new beginning. I was no longer the quiet woman in the background. The woman who had always kept her head down, who had always sacrificed her own needs to make everyone else's life better. The cafe had shown me a truth I hadn't been ready to face before. I was worth more than the roles I had been forced to play. I was more than just someone's mother, someone's wife, someone's caretaker. I was Margaret, and I wasn't going to hide that anymore. As the days went by, I found myself wearing my newfound confidence like a second skin. My posture changed. My stride became more purposeful. When I walked into a room, I didn't shrink or apologize for taking up space. I owned it. I could feel the shift within me, the quiet transformation that had been happening since I first opened the doors of my cafe. The woman I was now was different, stronger, unapologetic, and it felt incredible. I started dressing differently, too. Nothing flashy, but I chose clothes that made me feel good about myself. A sharp blazer here, a pair of boots there. Little things that made me feel more like me and less like someone who had been trying to fade into the background. I wasn't trying to impress anyone. I wasn't trying to be noticed. I was just doing it for me. The way people treated me began to change as well. I noticed it most when I interacted with people who had known me for years. Old acquaintances, former friends, even family. There was a shift in their tone, a kind of respect I had never received before. It wasn't the kind of respect you get when you're quiet and invisible, just trying to blend in. It was the kind of respect that comes from seeing someone stand tall, speak their truth, and take control of their own life. Amanda, of course, noticed the change in me. But by then, it no longer mattered how she saw me. She had made her choices. She had distanced herself for reasons I would never fully understand, and maybe that was okay. I couldn't control her. I couldn't make her see the woman I had become. But I could finally see her for who she was, a daughter who had her own path, her own struggles, her own misunderstandings. And I had my own journey to live. I didn't need her approval anymore. I didn't need anyone's approval. I had already given myself permission to exist in my own right. And that was a kind of freedom I had never known. The cafe continued to thrive. But it wasn't just the customers that made it special. It was what the cafe had come to represent. The power of self-rediscovery, of reclaiming who you are after years of giving yourself away. It wasn't just a nostalgic escape. It was a living, breathing testament to what happens when you finally put yourself first. It was proof that no matter your age, your past, or the scars you carry, you can rebuild, redefine, and rise again. I thought back to that first TikTok video I made, the one where I stood nervously in front of the cafe, unsure of what would come of it. The woman I was then felt like a stranger to me now. She was timid, hesitant, unsure. But today, I stood in front of that same cafe with pride. Today, I wasn't just Margaret the mother or Margaret the widow. I was Margaret, the businesswoman, the storyteller, the woman who had found her way back to herself. And as I looked around my cafe at the smiling faces, the people connecting over coffee and memories, I realized something else. This was no longer just my cafe. It was a place of empowerment for others, too. I wasn't the only one finding myself here. My customers, too, were rediscovering parts of themselves they had buried. I saw it in their eyes when they walked through the door, in the way they would linger over their cups, lost in thought. For some, this was a place to pause and reflect. For others, it was a place to heal. I had built something that wasn't just about nostalgia. It was about reclaiming the pieces of ourselves that we had lost over the years, about honoring the past while still moving forward. And in doing that, I had found my own sense of peace, my own sense of purpose. I wasn't done yet. I still had more to give, more to share. But for the first time in my life, I knew that whatever came next would be mine. I would face it head on with the strength and the clarity that I had found in myself. I was no longer afraid of being seen. I was no longer afraid of standing tall. Because now I knew that I belonged to myself, to the people who came through my doors, and to the world I had only just begun to fully embrace. As I look around the cafe now, I can't help but smile. The cafe has grown beyond what I ever imagined. It's no longer just a place where people come for a cup of coffee or a slice of pie. It's a gathering spot, a community of people who've come together to share their stories and rediscover themselves, just like I did. And every time I see someone sitting quietly with a cup in hand, reflecting on the past or laughing with a friend, I'm reminded of why I did all this in the first place. This journey of self-discovery, of building something from the ground up, wasn't easy. There were times when I doubted myself, when I questioned whether it was worth it. I struggled with family tensions, with fear, with the anxiety of putting myself out there in a way I never had before. But every challenge, every obstacle became part of the story I was writing for myself. And I realized in the end, it wasn't about perfection. It was about taking a leap, about giving myself the chance to grow and become the woman I was always meant to be. And as I sit here today in the cafe I've built from the ground up, I know that this is just the beginning. This new chapter of my life is one I never saw coming, but it's one I'm embracing fully. Because now, I know that the only approval I need is my own. I no longer feel the need to hide behind expectations or live for others. I'm living for myself, and for the first time, I feel like I'm exactly where I'm meant to be. I've learned that it's never too late to reclaim your power. It doesn't matter how many years have passed, how many sacrifices you've made, or how lost you feel. You can always find your way back to yourself. You can always rebuild, redefine, and rise again. It's about making the choice to do so, even when it feels like the world is telling you that your time has passed. If you're watching this and you've ever felt overlooked, if you've ever felt like your life is slipping away, or that you're just a background character in your own story, I want you to hear this. It's not too late. You are never too old to pursue your dreams. You are never too far gone to reclaim the life you deserve. Your voice matters. Your story matters. And you have the power to take up space and demand to be seen. I didn't start this journey because I wanted fame or attention. I didn't start it because I thought people would cheer for me. I started it because I realized that I had spent too many years hiding, too many years living for others. I wanted to live for myself. I wanted to create something that reflected who I was, who I am, and who I am still becoming. And I want you to know that you can do the same. There will be critics, of course. There will be people who don't understand, who try to tear you down. But those people don't get to define your worth. Only you do. You are in control of your story, and it's never too late to rewrite it. So, whether you're starting a new business, pursuing a creative passion, or simply taking back your personal power, I encourage you to take that step. Do it for yourself, and don't apologize for it. Stand tall. Embrace who you are, because your time is now. And if you ever need a little reminder of what's possible, I'll be here at my cafe, serving coffee and memories, building the life I always dreamed of. Because no matter where you're starting from, there's always room to grow. Thank you for being part of my story. Now it's your turn to write yours.